At my father's funeral luncheon, my mother told everyone my DNA proved I was not a Calhoun, and my brother used that sentence to take my chair at the restaurant, but both of them went pale when I laid Dad's blackened keyring beside my plate. Nobody else noticed the keys at first. They were too busy staring at me, the woman who had run Calhoun's pit for 9 years, now being called a stranger in front of cousins, church ladies, staff members, and the banker who held our building loan. My mother, Marlene, said it softly, like she hated having to wound me. My brother, Cole, said it louder, like he had been waiting his whole life to use the word blood. I did not cry. That bothered them more than anything. Cole leaned back in Dad's old chair and said, "June, don't make this uglier. You can keep your tips from this week, but ownership is family." My mother pressed a folded napkin against her mouth, performing grief for the room. I looked at the smoke-dark key ring, then at the empty place where Dad should have been, and I said, "Then you should both be careful about what he considered family." That was the first time my mother's mask slipped, not all the way, just enough for me to see fear behind it. 3 weeks earlier, before the luncheon, before the DNA test became a weapon, before everyone in Beaufort County learned my private humiliation over sweet tea and funeral ham, my father died with smoke still in his hair. He had collapsed behind the restaurant after the lunch rush, one hand braced against the brick wall, the other still wrapped around the keyring he wore on his belt. Calhoun's Pit was not fancy. It was a cinder-block barbecue place on the edge of town with a gravel lot, 2 smokers out back, and a Friday line long enough to make tourists think we had discovered some secret. We had not. Dad had just refused to rush meat, and I had refused to let the books bleed dry. By the time I reached the hospital, Dad was already gone. My mother was in the family room with Cole, who had flown in from Dallas in a suit that still had the airline crease in it. Cole hugged me like a brother for 4 seconds. Then he looked over my shoulder and asked, "Did you lock the cash drawer?" That was Cole. He could turn grief into inventory before the body was cold. Mom caught my face when I heard him. "He doesn't mean it like that," she whispered. "Your brother handles shock badly. She always did that." She translated cruelty into stress, selfishness into fear, and silence into love. For years, I let her. I was 32, but around my mother, I could still become 12, desperate to be the daughter who made the house easier to live in. Dad had been the one person who never asked me to make myself smaller. He had put me on the line when I was 16, taught me the fire, taught me payroll, and said, "If you can hold the heat, don't step back for someone born closer to the sign." That night, after the hospital, Mom asked me to come by the house. Cole said he was exhausted and stayed at the hotel. Mom and I sat at the kitchen table, where Dad used to sharpen knives every Sunday. She placed his key ring between us. The old pit key hung from it, blackened from years of smoke and grease, beside a smaller square-headed key I had never paid attention to, and a backdoor key worn smooth at the teeth. Mom slid the ring toward me, then stopped with 2 fingers still on the metal. "He wanted you to have this," she said. "But we need to be smart now." "Smart how?" I asked. "United," she said. "No sudden moves. No talk about percentages. No upsetting Cole. Your father's name is bigger than any one of us." I should have heard the warning in that. Instead, I heard a grieving widow trying to keep the walls standing. I told her I would not fight Cole. I told her the restaurant would open the next morning because Dad would have hated a locked door. Mom looked relieved, but not comforted. That difference matters. I did not understand it yet. The next morning, I opened Calhoun's Pit at 5. The staff came in quiet. Dina, our counter manager, brought a casserole nobody wanted and set it beside the register. She had worked for Dad longer than I had, and she could read a room before the first customer crossed the mat. "Your brother called me at midnight," she said while tying her apron. "Asked where we keep vendor contracts." I stopped trimming brisket. "Why would he ask you?" "Because he knows I answer the phone," Dina said. "And because he thought I'd be flattered." That was the first new pressure after Dad died. Cole was not just grieving badly, he was moving. By 8, he arrived with coffee for everyone and a smile for the regulars. He hugged staff he barely knew. He stood under Dad's picture near the register and told a retired sheriff, "We're going to honor the old man by growing this thing." The sheriff nodded because growth sounded respectful. I heard sale in it. I heard investors. I heard Cole turning Dad's smokehouse into a logo before the funeral home had printed the programs. When I pulled him into the hallway, Cole did not pretend. The land is worth more than the margins, he said. The brand is worth more than the building. Dad never understood that. Dad understood feeding people, I said. Cole smiled like I had proved his point. That's why you're great in the kitchen, June. It was a clean little cut. Not deep enough to make a scene over. Deep enough to mark my place. For the next 2 weeks, Mom changed tactics by the day. With me, she used softness. She asked me to choose Dad's burial shirt because you knew what he liked against his skin. She asked me to write the obituary because you have his plain way with words. She asked me to keep the restaurant calm because people look to you. Each request sounded like trust, but every one of them kept me working while Cole met with people who never came through the kitchen door. With Cole, Mom used legacy. I heard it one afternoon when I stepped into the office for deposit slips. The door was cracked. Mom said, "If you want the bank to listen, don't sound hungry. Sound protective." Cole answered, "I am protective." Mom said, "Then act less like you're selling and more like you're saving." I backed out before they saw me. My hands smelled like vinegar and smoke. I still did not know there was a DNA test hidden inside the stack of papers Cole kept carrying around. I still did not know my mother had already decided to say the cruelest thing in the softest voice. I only knew that when the funeral luncheon came, Dad's chair had been moved to the head of the table, Cole was sitting in it, and Mom could not look at the key ring in my hand. The morning after the funeral luncheon, Cole had a locksmith drilling through Dad's office door, before the flowers on the counter had even started to brown. Dina called me from the back hallway and whispered, "June, he's changing locks." I drove to Calhoun's pit with my hair still wet and my hands shaking so hard I dropped my keys in the gravel. When I pushed through the side entrance, Cole was standing by the office with a paper cup of coffee, telling the locksmith, "My sister's not authorized anymore." The word sister landed strange after what he and my mother had done to me in front of half the town. Yesterday, Marlene had said I was not a Calhoun by blood. Today, Cole was using me when it helped, and cutting me off when it did not. I walked past him and said, "Tell him to stop." Cole smiled like he had been waiting for me to make a scene. "Mom signed off on it. Dad's gone. We need clean control before the bank gets nervous." That was the first new piece I heard clearly. This was not grief making him reckless. This was timing. The locksmith slowed his drill, but Cole nodded for him to keep going. Metal screamed through the office door. Dina stood behind the counter with her arms folded, watching every person in that kitchen decide who was safe to obey. 2 dishwashers stayed near the sink. Our prep cook, Miguel, kept one hand on a tray of ribs and one eye on me. Nobody spoke, because Cole had picked the perfect kind of pressure. Not a shouting match. Not another family slap in public. He had made my authority look expired. I moved to the pit instead of the office. Dad's old keyring was in my palm before I fully understood why. Cole saw the blackened pit key and stepped away from the locksmith. "That belongs with the business assets," he said. "Then come take it," I said, and the whole kitchen went still. He did not move. That was when I understood what Dad had left me was not just metal. It was a question Cole could not answer in front of the staff. If he was the rightful son, and the new face of the place, why was he afraid of the one key that actually ran it? The pit key opened the lower firebox on the old smoker, the one Dad never let anyone touch unless they knew how to read the heat by smell. Cole had spent years calling the pit that greasy dinosaur, but that morning he stood there trying to look like ownership while I pulled the firebox door open and caught the draft before it flared. The night coals were wrong. Someone had choked the vent and stacked green wood over the embers. 10 briskets were turning bitter. Cole had not just locked me out. He had almost ruined the one product that paid everyone's rent. "Who touched my fire?" I asked. Miguel looked at Cole before he looked at me. That tiny glance changed the room. Cole said, "I hired a consultant. We're modernizing the process." I reached in with the old iron hook and dragged the smoking green wood out onto the ashtray. "Modernizing it into trash?" I said. No one laughed. It was better that way. A joke would have made it small. The smell did the work for me. Every person in that kitchen knew the meat was 15 minutes from being unsellable. Cole's strategy changed right there. He stopped pretending he understood the pit and started pretending I was unstable. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," he said, loud enough for the staff. "You're emotional, you're grieving, you're clinging to Dad's routine because you can't accept reality." Then he stepped closer and lowered his voice. "You heard Mom. You don't have the bloodline. Don't make me remove you in front of people who feel sorry for you. That was his leverage. He knew my worst fear was not losing the building. It was being seen as a desperate woman begging for a place that was never hers. For one breath, it worked. I saw Dad's chair from the corner of my eye. I heard Marlene's voice at the luncheon saying I was not his. I felt every year I had opened that restaurant before dawn become something someone else could rename as charity. Then Dina slammed a stack of takeout lids on the counter and broke the spell. "We've got 36 lunch orders due by 11, she said. "If June walks out, I'm calling every customer and telling them why." Cole turned on her. "Careful." Dina did not blink. "I am careful. I've got a mortgage and a kid on insulin. That's why I know who keeps this place alive." That was the first person who did not just feel bad for me. Dina had something to lose, and she still chose a side in front of him. It gave the room permission to breathe. Miguel set the ribs down beside me. The dishwasher moved the ruined green wood away. Cole saw the kitchen sliding out of his hand, so he reached for a different weapon. "Fine," he said. "Run your little lunch. But the vendor accounts are frozen until I review them. No meat delivery comes in without my approval. Let's see how long loyalty feeds people." He left before I could answer, because he knew a threat lands cleaner when the other person has grease on her hands and no time to chase it. 10 minutes later, my mother came through the back door, wearing the same soft voice she used at church when she asked people to pray for her. She did not look at the pit. She looked at me. "June, sweetheart, do not turn this into a war." I kept trimming bark off the first brisket because if I stopped, I might have let her voice pull me backward. Cole changed the locks. Marlene sighed. "He is trying to protect what your father built," I said. "Dad gave me the key ring." Her mouth tightened. "Your father gave people what they wanted so he didn't have to tell them the truth." There it was again. Not proof, not a clear confession, but a crack in the story she had told the room yesterday. She wanted me to believe Dad had humored me. She also wanted the keys gone. Both things could not be true. I asked. What truth scared him? Marlene's face hardened so fast I knew I had stepped near something real. "The truth is that I raised you when I did not have to," she said. "A decent daughter would remember that before she humiliates her mother over a restaurant." That sentence cut deeper than Cole's, because it used every childhood debt I had ever carried. She had packed my school lunches. She had sat beside my bed when I had pneumonia. She had also waited until Dad was dead to make me feel rented. I wiped my hands on a towel and said, "If you raised me, then stop asking me to disappear." Marlene looked past me at Dina, Miguel, the whole listening kitchen, and her cover slipped again. "You do not know what that place did to me," she said. She meant the pit. She meant Dad. She meant something older than yesterday. The lunch rush saved me from answering. Customers started lining up before the open sign was turned. Word had spread that Cole had taken over, and half the town came hungry for barbecue and gossip. I did not give them either. I sliced meat, called orders, corrected sauce trays, and kept the line moving. Every plate that left the window made Cole's lock change look smaller. Every staff member who looked to me before moving made Marlene quieter. For 3 hours, the restaurant did not belong to blood or paper or a polished son from Dallas. It belonged to the hands that knew how not to burn it down. Near 2 o'clock, Cole came back with a yellow legal pad, a frozen vendor account, and a smile that told me he had already planned the next morning. The next morning, Cole tried to kill the lunch rush before the doors opened by telling our meat vendor I was fired and the restaurant was closed for inspection. The driver stood at the back door with 40 pounds of sausage and a face full of apology, while Cole stood behind him holding Dad's office phone like he had inherited the whole town through the receiver. "No deliveries without my approval," Cole said. "We're cleaning up unauthorized spending." What he meant was simple. If he could starve the pit for one day, he could make me look like the reason Calhoun's failed. I did not argue with Cole in front of the driver. I paid for the sausage from the cash drawer, wrote the amount on a receipt slip, and handed the driver a biscuit because Dad had always fed people who brought us food. Cole smiled like I had just proved his point. "See," he said. "She's using business cash without permission." Dina shut the drawer with her hip and said, "That drawer exists because she opened this place at 5:30 while you were still learning where the light switches are." Miguel did not speak, but he took the sausage from the driver and moved it inside before Cole could block the door. That morning, Cole stopped trying to look angry and started trying to look responsible. He walked through the kitchen with a yellow legal pad and asked people for their full names, their hours, and whether they had been properly supervised. He never said he was firing anyone. He just made every person feel like their paycheck had turned into a favor. Miguel had 2 kids and a rent check due Friday. Dina's mother lived with her. Cole knew he did not have to own their loyalty if he could make them afraid of missing 1 week's pay. The new pressure was not my pride. It was the clock. We had 2 hours until lunch. 1 week fire, a cooler Cole kept trying to audit, and customers who would not care about our family blood war if the meat came out bitter. I went to the pit and saw the damage clearer in daylight. The green wood had sweated into the coal bed. The lower vent had been packed tight. Whoever did it had not just made a mistake. They had tried to make the smoke turn dirty from the bottom up. Cole followed me outside and said, "Don't touch that until I get a licensed equipment guy." He said it loud enough for Miguel to hear. Then he added, "If anything happens, it's on you." That was his next move. If I fixed the pit, he would call it tampering. If I left it alone, lunch would fail. He had built a trap out of smoke and time. I took Dad's key ring from my pocket and found the blackened pit key by feel. Cole's face changed before he could stop it. He knew the office lock could be drilled. He knew vendor accounts could be frozen. But that pit key still made him look like a boy caught in the wrong drawer. I crouched at the lower firebox, pushed ash away from a warped iron lip, and found the little slot Dad had shown me when I was 22, and crying because I had ruined 6 briskets before sunrise. The pit forgives slow, Dad had told me then. It does not forgive panic. I slid the key in, turned it once, and the stuck lower draft plate dropped open with a hard metal cough. Clean air pulled through the firebox. The ugly smoke thinned. Miguel leaned in, saw the draft catch, and said, "That's why the old man never let anybody paint over that door." Cole stared at the opening like the pit had testified against him. It was not paperwork. It was not DNA. It was the restaurant breathing again because Dad had trusted me with the one thing Cole did not know how to use. I did not celebrate. I told Miguel to pull the green wood out and feed the fire small. I told Dina to change the board to chopped beef, sausage, beans, and no ribs until 2. Then I went back inside and opened the front door myself. The first customers were 3 linemen, 2 church ladies, and Mr. Helper from the bank, who always pretended he came for lunch when he really came to count cars in the lot. Cole saw him and immediately changed faces again. "Mr. Helper," he said, stepping out from behind the counter. "I'm glad you're here. We're stabilizing operations after some unauthorized management." Mr. Helper looked at the line, then at the smoke, moving clean from the stack. "Smells stable to me." He said it dry, but he did not smile. That was the thing about bankers in a small town. They did not have to raise their voices to make everyone hear the loans sitting under the floorboards. Cole lowered his legal pad. "There are ownership questions," he said. "Family questions. We have reason to believe June's authority was based on a misunderstanding." He did not say the DNA test this time. He had learned that saying it too often made him look cruel instead of careful. Mr. Halper turned to me. "Can you serve lunch today?" I said. "Yes." He looked at Cole. "Can you?" Cole's jaw tightened. That one question moved the room. It did not settle anything, but it forced Cole into the one test he had been avoiding. He could talk about bloodlines, locks, and authorization. He could not cook the meat already paid for by the people in line. Marlene came in just before noon, and the room shifted again. She had dressed like a grieving widow who had accidentally wandered into a fight she did not start. That was her gift. She could look wounded while holding the knife by the handle. Cole went straight to her. "Tell Mr. Helper we need to pause operations until the estate is clear." Marlene looked at the customers, then at me behind the counter, then at the stack outside. For 1 second, I thought she might choose the restaurant over the lie. Instead, she said, "June has always been emotional about this place." It was softer than an accusation, and worse because of it. She made my competence sound like a symptom. Dina's hand froze over the ticket rail. Miguel looked down at the cutting board. Mr. Halper watched me, waiting to see if I would give Cole the outburst he needed. I wrapped a sausage plate, set it on the counter, and called number 12. My voice did not shake. That did more damage to Cole than yelling would have. Customers moved forward. Money went into the drawer. The line did not break. Cole had tried to turn lunch into a courtroom, and I turned it back into lunch. When the rush thinned, I found Marlene by the side sink and blocked her before she could leave. "You said Dad gave people what they wanted so he did not have to tell the truth," I said. "What truth?" Marlene kept drying her hands with a paper towel long after they were dry. Not here. Yes, here, I said. You made it public when it helped Cole. You do not get privacy now that it hurts me. Her face went sharp. Your father loved being needed. That was his weakness. That is not an answer. Marlene looked toward the dining room, where Cole was laughing too loudly with Mr. Halper. Then she said the first thing that actually cut through the noise. You were never the problem, June. The promise was. I waited. She swallowed. He brought you home because someone asked him to. He told me it would be temporary. Then he looked at you like you had saved him from himself. And suddenly I was the cruel one for remembering how it started. The room seemed to narrow around that sentence. It did not tell me everything. It told me enough to hurt in a new place. Dad had chosen me, but maybe not in the clean, simple way I had carried all my life. Marlene had invented the wound. She had sharpened it and waited years to use it. Who asked him? I said. Marlene's eyes flicked to the keyring still in my hand. Ask what the smaller key was really for, she said. Not the pit, before that. Cole appeared behind her before I could answer. He had heard enough to know the ground was moving under him, not enough to know where to step, so he picked the cruelest available weapon. Great, he said. Now that we're all being honest, maybe we stop pretending a stray with a sad story gets to keep the Calhoun name on the building. Marlene flinched. Not at the insult. At the word building. That was when I understood Cole had another plan running under the first one. He had not only come for Dad's chair or the office, he had come for the name itself. 10 minutes later, through the front window, I saw a white service truck pull up under our sign. A man climbed out with a ladder and a drill, and Cole did not look surprised. The service truck's drill bit hit the sign above our door, and Cole smiled at me like he was finally unscrewing my name from my body. Step back, June, he called, loud enough for the lunch line to hear. This is a family business again. The first screw screamed out of the old metal, and every person waiting for ribs looked up at the word Calhoun hanging over us like it had already decided against me. I walked straight to the ladder, not fast, because Cole wanted me to run and make myself look crazy. Dina came out behind me with her order pad still in her hand. Miguel stood in the open kitchen door with his apron on, watching the man on the ladder loosen the second corner. The sign crew had no hate in them. That made it worse. They were just men doing a paid job, and Cole had made my erasure look like maintenance. You can't take that down during service, I said. There are customers under it. The foreman glanced down. Ma'am, we were told the place is closed for rebranding after today. Cole lifted his chin. Temporary disruption. Necessary correction. That word, correction, landed harder than any curse. He was not just changing a sign. He was trying to make me sound like the mistake Dad had tolerated too long. I looked at the lunch line. Some people stared at their shoes. Some stared at me. Mr. Halper had not left yet. He stood near the curb with his phone in his hand, but he was not filming. He was watching risk turn into something he could name. I knew then that if I begged, Cole would win two ways. He would get the sign down, and he would get a story about me losing control in front of customers. The foreman set his drill down and climbed one rung lower. I'm not here for a fight. His name was stitched on his shirt. Rafe. I got a work order to remove the face panel, scrape the backing, and hang the new plate. Dina snapped. New plate says what? Cole answered before Rafe could. Calhoun Smoke Company. He smiled at me again. Cleaner, broader, less attached to one employee's feelings. That was his new tactic. He had stopped arguing about who could run the pit. Now he was trying to turn the restaurant into a shell and make me an emotional leftover inside it. Marlene stepped out of the dining room then, and the line went quiet in that way. People do when family trouble becomes free entertainment. She looked at the ladder, then at Cole, and her mouth tightened. It was not shock. It was recognition. Cole saw it too, and for the first time that morning, his voice sharpened. Mom, go inside. Marlene did not move. The drill started again. Another screw came loose. The old sign dipped at one corner, and a strip of dirty paint showed behind it. I saw two words under the grime before anyone else did. Not because I was looking for proof. Because I had cleaned that wall every spring, and I knew what belonged there. The exposed strip showed faded red letters under the Calhoun panel. The first word ended in ER. The second word began with Cal. Rafe stopped drilling. He leaned in, scraped once with his thumbnail, and said, Well, I'll be damned. Cole snapped. Keep going. Rafe did not keep going. He wiped a wider patch with his palm, and the old paint came back in broken pieces. Mercer and Calhoun. The name hit the sidewalk like a dropped pan. Mercer was not a vendor. It was not a town. It was the name Marlene had once cut off a story when I was 12 and asked who taught Dad the vinegar mop. She had said, "Nobody you need to know." I turned toward her. Marlene's face had gone flat and pale, not with surprise, but with the exhaustion of someone whose lie had finally found daylight without asking permission. Cole stepped between us. "Old paint doesn't mean anything," he said. "Every building has old paint." Rafe looked down from the ladder. "My father painted that first sign." His voice changed. It was no longer contractor polite. He talked about it for years. Said Eddie Calhoun had a partner who could outsmoke every man in 3 counties. Marlene whispered, "Rafe, don't." That one sentence told me Rafe was not inventing a memory to help me. He was stepping into something older than the fight Cole had staged. Rafe looked at her with hurt in his face. "Mrs. Calhoun, my dad wouldn't let anybody paint over that first layer. He said Mr. Calhoun made him promise. That's why the face panel was mounted off the wall." Cole reached for the ladder. "You were hired to remove it." Rafe pulled his boot up one rung. "I was hired to do a sign job, not bury my father's work because you've got a family argument." Cole adapted fast. He turned to the customers, and his voice softened into the one he used for donors and lenders. "This is exactly why I'm cleaning the place up. Old rumors, old attachments, no paperwork anyone can trust. My sister is grieving. She's reading meaning into paint." There it was. He gave the crowd a gentle explanation for my pain before I could speak for myself. He made himself reasonable. He made me sentimental. He even called me his sister because it helped him look kind while cutting me off at the knees. I reached into my pocket and closed my hand around Dad's keyring. Marlene had said the smaller key had been for something before the pit, and now I saw a rusted square plate under the sign, half hidden behind the loose corner. It was not a lock you noticed unless you already knew old equipment hid its secrets in ugly places. I stepped past Cole and lifted the dangling edge of the sign with one hand. "Rafe," I said, "hold it steady." Cole grabbed my wrist. Not hard enough to bruise, but hard enough to remind me he thought touch was permission. I looked at his hand until he let go. The small square-headed key fit the rusted plate on the first try. That click changed the air more than shouting could have. Rafe sucked in a breath. Marlene covered her mouth. Behind the plate was not a document, not a letter, not the easy kind of truth people can argue into dust. It was a narrow metal tag, bolted into the wall behind the original sign. 2 sets of initials were stamped into it by hand. EC and LM. Beneath them was a date from before I was born. Rafe read it out loud before Cole could stop him. Eddie Calhoun, Lila Mercer. The name Lila struck something in me I did not know, had been waiting. Marlene made a sound then, one short broken sound, and I turned because it was the first honest thing I had heard from her all week. "Who was she?" I asked. Marlene looked at the loose sign, the customers, Cole's clenched jaw, and finally at me. For once, she did not protect the clean version first. "She was the woman your father brought you home for," she said. "And she was the one who asked him." Cole's face changed before he could fix it. He had known the name. He had known enough to rush the sign down before anyone else saw the layer underneath. That was the midpoint I had not expected. Cole was not trying to remove me because I was not Calhoun blood. He was trying to remove the one bloodline that made the restaurant less his than he had told everyone. Marlene took one step toward me, but Cole cut her off with a voice that finally cracked. "Lila Mercer gave up her claim," he said. "She gave up everything." He realized too late what he had admitted. The sidewalk went still. I kept my hand on Dad's key in the opened plate, and for the first time all day, Cole looked at the sign like it was the thing about to testify against him. Cole looked at the metal tag in my palm and said, loud enough for the patio to hear, "That doesn't make you family, June. It just proves Dad felt sorry for the wrong woman." The whole line stopped breathing around us. Rafe still had one hand on the half-loosened sign. Miguel stood in the kitchen doorway with smoke rolling past his shoulder. "Mr." Halper watched from beside the host stand, not writing anything down, which somehow felt worse. Cole had lost the sign, so he changed the fight. He stopped arguing about ownership and went straight for blood. Marlene made a sound like someone had pressed a thumb into an old bruise. "Cole," she said, "do not." He turned on her with a smile too calm to be honest. "No, Mom. If June wants old names, let's use all of them." Then he faced me. Lila Mercer wasn't some saintly partner. She was trouble. Dad cleaned up after her. Same way he cleaned up after you. And now you're standing here holding a piece of junk like it's a crown. That was the first time I understood Cole's real fear. It was not that I had no claim. It was that I had one he could not rename without exposing what had been buried under his own feet. I closed my fingers around the tag before my hand could shake. Say exactly what you mean, I told him. Cole's smile twitched because he had expected tears, not a clear question. You are not Eddie Calhoun's blood, he said. You were brought in. You were fed. You were pitied. And now you're trying to steal a name you were never born to. A few customers looked away. A few leaned closer. Dina whispered my name, warning me not to give him the explosion he wanted. I heard her, but I was listening to Marlene. She had gone pale, and that told me Cole had only told half of it. Marlene stepped between us before I could answer. Inside, she said to me. Now. Cole laughed. Perfect, hide her again. But Marlene did not look at him. She looked at Mr. Halper. Give me 10 minutes before you decide this place is unstable. Mr. Halper's jaw tightened. 10, he said. After that I need to see who is actually in charge here. That sentence cut through the whole patio. The bank did not care about family shame. The bank cared whether the restaurant could survive the people fighting over it. Marlene took me through the side hall to the dry storage room, away from the customers and the sign crew. Miguel followed us to the doorway, but Marlene stopped him. Not this part, she said. I expected Miguel to argue. He did not. He just said, then don't leave her carrying it alone, and went back to the pit. That small sentence steadied me more than any hug could have. It reminded me there were people in that building who did not need a blood test to know what I had done for it. Marlene shut the door and leaned against the shelves like her bones had finally asked for payment. Lila Mercer was your mother, she said. No soft Latin, no careful road, just the sentence Cole had been circling with a knife. My grip tightened around the tag until the stamped letters dug into my palm. E, C, and LM had not been a partnership mark only. They had been the two halves of the life I had never been allowed to name. Marlene wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. Eddie was not your blood father, but he chose you before you had a name. That part was never pity. I wanted to ask 20 questions, but only one came out. Why did everybody lie? Marlene looked at the closed door, as if Cole could still reach through it. Because Lila made enemies before you were born. Not bad debts, not gossip, real enemies. She walked away from this place so Eddie could raise you without people coming after the baby she had left behind. I shook my head. Cole said she gave up her claim. Marlene's face hardened. Cole says what helps Cole. Lila gave up being seen. That is not the same as giving up what was yours. The words should have freed me. Instead, they hit like a second betrayal. Marlene had known I was carrying a missing half of myself every day I scrubbed that pit, counted that register, and let Cole call me lucky to be included. Dad knew? I asked. Of course he knew, Marlene said. He loved you like choice was stronger than blood. But he also thought silence could protect you forever. Her voice cracked there, and for the first time I heard anger under her guilt. He was wrong. I was wrong with him. And Cole found the weak place we left. A crash came from the dining room. Not glass, metal. Marlene opened the door before I moved. We came out to find Cole beside the host stand with one of Rafe's removed sign brackets in his hand. He had not thrown it by accident. He had dropped it hard enough to make every customer look at him instead of the kitchen. Since we're being honest, Cole announced. I'm not letting this restaurant be dragged into a dead woman's mess. Anyone who stays on June's shift tonight may not have a job when the new company takes over. There was his next tactic. He could not erase the sign, so he tried to starve the room of workers. Dina did not hesitate. She pulled her order pad from her apron and slapped it on the host stand. For one awful second, I thought she was quitting. Then she looked at Cole and said, You offered me her job yesterday if I kept quiet during the sign change. I said no then. And I'm saying it where everyone can hear me now. Cole's face changed, not into fear yet, but into calculation. Dina, don't embarrass yourself. She laughed once, sharp and tired. You promised me a title without a paycheck. That's not a promotion. That's bait. Her payoff was not loyalty for loyalty's sake. She had seen exactly how Cole used people who wanted to step up. Miguel came out next, wiping his hands on a towel. The pit is running, he said to me, not Cole. The ribs are holding. I need a yes or no. That was the cleanest question anyone had asked me all day. Cole wanted the room to wait for his version of my blood. Miguel wanted to know whether dinner was still going out. Mr. Halper was watching that difference. So were the customers. I looked at the half-stripped sign, the bracket on the floor, the tag in my hand, and the people waiting to see whether I would shrink into the story Cole had chosen for me. "Yes," I said. "Serve the food." Then I turned to Rafe. "Leave the old layer showing. Don't cover Mercer. Don't cover Calhoun. Not tonight." Rafe nodded once and climbed back up the ladder. Cole stepped toward him. "You touch that sign again and I'll sue you personally." Rafe did not even look down. "My dad painted the first name up here," he said. "I'm not the one who's scared of paint." A few people in the dining room made low sounds. Not cheers. Not yet. Just recognition. Cole had built his whole case on looking like the adult in the room. Now every person there could see he was fighting a sign because the old letters told a story he could not control. Mr. Halper walked to the host stand and lowered his voice, but he did not ask to speak privately. "June, the bank still has a problem. A divided family and a contested brand are risk." Cole jumped on that. "Exactly." Mr. Halper lifted one hand, and Cole stopped because bankers have a way of making silence feel expensive. "But an operating kitchen, a staff that follows one voice, and a full dining room are also facts," Mr. Halper said. "I'll be back at closing. By then I need to know whether this place has one captain." He looked at Cole when he said the last word, and Cole understood the insult. For the next hour, I did not chase Cole. I worked. I called tables by number. I cut off 2 refunds before they became rumors. I sent Dina to seat the line that had formed outside, because people had seen the exposed sign from the sidewalk. I told Miguel to stop saving the best trays for later and run them now. Every order that left the kitchen made Cole smaller in the room, because his whole threat depended on the place looking broken without him. It did not. It looked wounded, loud, and alive. Marlene stayed near the register, ringing up checks with hands that still trembled. Cole watched her, and I saw him find another angle. He leaned close to her, and said something I could not hear. Marlene flinched. And that told me he had stopped attacking me and gone after the person whose guilt he understood best. When I reached them, Cole smiled like a son asking his mother for a glass of water. "Mom was about to explain why June's mother vanished," he said. "But I think she should do it with the banker listening." Cole had Marlene backed against the breaker panel with his hand on the main switch, telling her he would shut down dinner service unless she said, out loud, that I was never Eddie Calhoun's daughter. The kitchen was still moving behind me. Tickets were still clipped above the line. Customers were still waiting for food they had already paid for, and Cole had finally stopped pretending he wanted the restaurant saved. I stepped between him and the switch before Marlene could answer. "Take your hand off it," I said. Cole looked past me at Mr. Halper, like he still believed the bankman would see him as the calm one. "This is what I mean," Cole said. "She gets emotional. She makes scenes. She doesn't understand liability." Then he turned to Marlene and softened his voice so fast it made my stomach turn. "Mom, tell her the truth. Eddie pitied her. That's all. Don't let her steal what's left because you feel guilty." Marlene's face changed at the word guilty. Not because it was false. Because Cole knew exactly where to press. For years he had used her silence like a handle. If she defended me, he reminded her she had lied. If she defended Eddie, he reminded her Eddie was dead. If she defended herself, he called it selfish. That was Cole's real talent. He could make cruelty sound like the responsible option. Miguel called from the line. "June, I need a call on table 12. That saved me from answering Cole the way he wanted. I turned my head just enough for Miguel to hear me. 2 brisket plates, no comps, no delays. Keep moving." Then I looked back at Cole. "Service does not stop because you're losing an argument." "That was the first time, Mr. Halper wrote something down without asking a question. Cole dropped his hand from the switch, but he was not done. He moved to the back door and shoved it open right as Nate, our wood supplier, rolled in with the last stack for the smoker. Nate's face was already tight. "I need payment before unload," he said. Account got changed to hold. Cole did not look surprised. That was the new knife. If he could not win with blood, he would starve the fire and let the restaurant fail in front of the bank. For 1 second, every sound in the kitchen sharpened. The smoker needed that wood. The dining room needed those plates. Mr. Halper did not need a speech about family. He needed to see whether I could keep the business alive. while Cole tried to choke it. Cole folded his arms and said, "That's what happens when unauthorized people run things." He had arranged the trap before he touched the breaker. He wanted me to look helpless twice. Dina came out of the server station with her order pad in her fist. She did not look at me first. She looked at Nate. "You still take house tabs from regulars?" Nate said. "Not on a hold account." Dina nodded once, like that answer cost her something. Then she turned to me. "Cole offered me closing manager if I backed him. He said he'd put my insurance through before my daughter's next appointment." Her voice did not shake, but her face burned with shame. "I almost said yes," Cole snapped. "Don't drag your kid into this." Dina looked at him then. "You did." That line landed harder than a shout. It told the room Cole had not only been fighting me, he had been shopping the staff's weak spots one by one, promising each person a private rescue if they helped him take the place. I did not hug Dina. I did not forgive her in front of everyone to make the room feel better. I needed her help, and she needed a clean way back. "Run Table 9's card now," I said. They prepaid the family tray for pickup. "Use that cash drawer for Nate. Put the receipt under my register clip." Dina moved before Cole could stop her. Miguel called. "I can stretch the oak for 20 minutes. Nate looked from Cole to me. "If she pays, I unload." In that moment, the restaurant did not need a family tree. It needed one person making decisions that other people followed. Cole saw the shift before anyone named it. His face did not break. It tightened. He stepped close to Mr. Halper and lowered his voice, but I still heard enough. "You back her tonight, and you inherit every lie attached to her." Mr. Halper looked tired, not frightened. "I'm not backing a childhood story," he said. "I'm watching who can operate under pressure." Then he walked to the pass, took the next ticket from Miguel's rail, and held it up. "Who authorized this kitchen right now?" Miguel answered first. "June." Dina answered from the register. "June." Nate, halfway through the door with the wood, said, "I'm unloading for June." No one made it dramatic. No one clapped. That made it stronger. Cole had spent all night trying to make my place in that building sound imaginary. The people keeping the building alive named it like a fact. Marlene finally stepped away from the breaker panel. She looked smaller than she had when the night began, but her voice cut through the kitchen. "Eddie did not pity June," she said. Cole turned on her fast. "Mom." Marlene flinched, then kept going. "Eddie chose her before he ever held her. Lila Mercer made this place with him. I helped bury her name because I was scared of what people would say, and because I wanted one family that did not look broken from the outside." The kitchen went quiet in the dangerous way. A kitchen can, when the fire is still working but every person is listening. Marlene did not explain everything. She gave only enough to change the ground under Cole's feet. Lila had not been a stranger passing through our story. She had been at the foundation, and Marlene had not hidden her out of ignorance. She had hidden her out of fear, then let that fear harden into the version of the family Cole now wanted to own. Cole recovered by changing the target again. He gave Marlene a sad smile meant for witnesses. "You hear that?" he said to Mr. Halper. "She's unstable. She'll say anything to punish me." Then he looked at me. "You're building your claim on a woman who just admitted she lied for 30 years. It was almost clever. He took Marlene's confession and tried to turn it into poison before anyone could breathe. I picked up Dad's keyring from the prep shelf, where I had set it down after opening the sign plate. I did not hold it up like proof. I put it in my apron pocket, where it belonged if I was the one closing the building. "Marlene's lie hurt me," I said. "Your lie tried to erase me while taking the business she helped hide." Then I turned to Mr. Halper. "You asked who is in charge by closing. Watch the last hour. Cole does not touch the register, the breaker, the smoker, the vendor account, or the staff schedule. If service fails under me, you'll see it. If it doesn't, you'll know." Mr. Halper looked at Cole. "Can you stand down for 1 hour?" Cole laughed once. "So now I need permission to exist in my own family's restaurant?" Mr. Halper did not answer the insult. "1 hour," he said. "If you interfere with operations again, I will treat June as the only acting manager until the ownership issue is untangled." That was not a final victory. It was not the whole war. But it was the first outside line Cole had not drawn himself. Cole backed away from the pass, and for the first time that night, he had nowhere clean to stand. If he stayed quiet, I ran the restaurant. If he interfered, he proved Mr. Halper right. If he attacked Marlene again, he looked afraid of what else she might say. He chose the only move left to him. He smiled at me like he still had a door I had not seen. "Finish your hour," he said. "Then ask Mom what happened the night Lila disappeared from this kitchen." Marlene made a sound so small I almost missed it under the printer spitting out another ticket. I turned toward her, and the fear on her face was older than Cole, older than me, older than the sign outside. She gripped the edge of the prep table and whispered, "June? He doesn't know all of it." Then she looked at the back door Nate had just rolled through with the wood and said, "But I do." Marlene had just did muck. He said it loud enough for the line cooks, Dina, Miguel, Nate, and Mr. Helper to hear. "You can plate all the ribs you want, June. Blood still decides who belongs here." My hand closed around Dad's key ring in my apron pocket, but I did not pull it out. Not yet. Marlene looked at Cole, and for the first time all night, she looked more afraid of the truth than of him. I said, "Tell it now." Marlene shook her head once, like a person refusing a ledge. Cole smiled because he thought silence still belonged to him. He turned toward Mr. Halper and said, "This is exactly what I mean. She has no claim, no name, no bloodline, and now she's cornering my mother for a bedtime story." Mr. Halper did not answer him. He looked at Marlene. That small shift cracked something. Marlene pressed both hands against the prep table and said, "Eddie was not your father either, Cole." The kitchen went so quiet that the fryer sounded violent. Cole's face did not break all at once. First he laughed. Then he looked at his mother as if she had spoken in the wrong language. "Shut up," he said. Marlene did not. "Eddie gave you his name because I begged him to. He loved you anyway. He never once threw it in your face." Cole reached for the edge of the table and missed it. The insult he had used on me had turned in his mouth and cut him before he could spit it out again. Marlene looked at me next, and the old fear in her had no place left to hide. "Lila found out," she said. "Not about you. About Cole. She found out I had been taking cash from the drawer to pay the man who could have exposed me. Lila told me she was going to tell Eddie after closing." Marlene swallowed hard. "I told her Eddie would never choose her over the child he had already raised as his son. I told her if she stayed, I would say she stole from the restaurant and tried to take you away. She had no family here. She believed I could make her look dangerous." My stomach went cold, but my feet stayed planted. This was the truth with teeth in it. Lila had not floated out of our lives like a rumor. She had been shoved toward the door by a woman who knew exactly which fear would move her. "She came back that night," Marlene said. "After the last table left. She wanted to wake Eddie. I blocked the office door. I told her you were safer with him than with a woman everyone would call a thief. She left to cool down. She said she would come back with help." Marlene's voice thinned. "She never came back. Eddie thought she chose to leave. I let him think it because the lie kept Cole safe and kept me inside this family." Cole slapped the table so hard a pan jumped. "You stupid woman," he said. "Do you hear yourself? You just handed her a sob story and ruined all of us." That was his next move. Not denial anymore. Salvage. If the bloodline was rotten, he would make the whole place look rotten with it. He pointed at Mr. Halper. "You cannot finance this mess. No one even knows whose restaurant this is." Mr. Halper finally spoke. "I know who kept it open tonight." Cole turned on him. "That is not ownership." Mr. Halper said, "No, but it is risk. And right now, she is the only person reducing mine." He nodded toward the dining room, where Dina was calling orders, Miguel was landing plates, and Nate was feeding split wood toward the oven like he had been part of us for years. "Your plan shut down service. Her plan restored it." Cole changed again. He went soft. That was worse than his shouting. He stepped close to Marlene and lowered his voice, but everyone still heard him. "Mom, look at me. You're tired. You're confused. Tell them you misspoke." Marlene's eyes filled, and for 1 second I saw how that leash had worked between them. He had not only used her secrets, he had trained her to protect him from the cost of them. Marlene almost folded. Then Dina came through the swinging door with Cole's cash envelope in her hand and dropped it on the prep table. "He offered me this to walk out during dinner," Dina said. "I'm done being useful to cowards." Her voice shook, but she stayed. That mattered. Dina was not saving me. She was choosing not to sell the room back to him. Miguel looked at Mr. Halper and said, "If June is running tomorrow, I open at 6. One by one, the power moved without a speech. It moved through people who had work to do and finally knew who was trying to stop it. Cole saw it leave him. That was when he lunged for my apron pocket. He knew the key ring was there because he had watched me touch it all night. I stepped back before his hand reached me. Miguel moved between us, but I put my arm out and stopped him. I pulled out Dad's key ring and held it flat in my palm with the old metal tag beside it. "You don't get to grab what Eddie gave freely," I said. "Not from me. Not from her. Not from anybody in this kitchen." Cole's mouth twisted. "You think those keys make you legitimate?" I said. "No, they make this building work." Then I used the worn backdoor key, unlocked the alley door, and let Nate's last stack of wood come in before the fire dropped. It was a small act, almost ugly in how practical it was. But it ended the argument better than another speech could have. The restaurant needed heat. I gave it heat. Mr. Halper looked at the line, the open back door, the exposed Mercer and Calhoun sign, and Cole standing empty-handed in the middle of the kitchen. Then he took out his phone. "I'm calling the Banker U office now," he said. "Until the estate and ownership claims are reviewed, June stays listed as acting operations manager. No account changes without dual approval. No lock changes. No vendor holds. No rebrand. No interference with service." Cole's face went gray. "You can't do that, Mr." Halper looked at him the way he had looked at bad balance sheets for 30 years. "I can protect collateral from the person actively damaging it." Marlene covered her mouth, but this time she was not performing grief. She was watching the shape of the truth become real, and finding out it did not kill her. Cole turned to the customers, searching for one face that still saw him as the rightful son. He found church ladies who had heard him call me a stray. He found staff who had watched him threaten their paychecks. He found a banker who had seen him reach for the breaker. Then he found me. "You think you won?" he said. I looked past him at the exposed sign. The old letters did not look pretty. They looked stubborn. Mercer and Calhoun still there after all those years, not bright, not clean, but not gone. "No," I said. "I think dinner is ready." That was the part Cole could not survive. Not a fight. Not a speech. A normal sentence that told the room he was no longer the center of it. Dina rang the bell for table 12. Miguel slid 2 brisket plates into the window. Nate stacked the last of the wood by the smoker. Rafe climbed down from the ladder and left the old sign showing exactly as it was, half Calhoun, half Mercer, all truth. Cole stood there for another full minute, waiting for someone to ask him what came next. Nobody did. Finally, he walked out through the front door, under the name he had tried to erase, and for once the whole town watched him leave without following. Marlene stayed. She did not ask me to forgive her. That was the first decent thing she did all night. She stood beside the register, hands trembling, and said, "I will tell you everything I know about Lila. Not tonight in pieces, not when Cole can use it. Tomorrow, with a lawyer, with the bank, with whatever records Eddie left." I wanted to hate her cleanly. I could not. The truth had not made her innocent. It had made her smaller, sadder, and more human than the mother I had been trying to obey my whole life. "Tomorrow," I said. "Tonight you ring checks, and you do not soften what he did." She nodded. It was not forgiveness. It was a boundary. For the first time, she accepted one without translating it into cruelty. We closed after 10 with grease on the floor, smoke in the curtains, and the biggest sales night we had seen since the county fair. Mr. Halper stayed until the last ticket cleared. He did not compliment me. Bankers rarely do. He only said, "Send me tomorrow's opening numbers by 8. I said, "You'll have them by 7. Dina laughed behind me, tired and real. Miguel set the clean knives on the magnet strip and said, 6 o'clock? I said 5:30. Nate knocked twice on the back door before leaving, a habit Dad had taught every vendor who came after dark. Rafe took one final look at the sign and said, "My father would have liked seeing that old paint breathe." After they left, I stood alone under the exposed letters with Dad's key ring in my hand. For years, I thought belonging meant someone had to prove I was born close enough to the name. That night, I finally understood what Dad had tried to teach me with fire, payroll, and an ugly old key ring. Blood can explain where you came from. It cannot run a kitchen. It cannot keep a promise. It cannot make people follow you when the fire is low and the room is watching. The next morning, Calhoun's pit opened at 5:30. I left the old sign uncovered. By noon, the line wrapped around the gravel lot. Some came for barbecue, some came for gossip. But when they reached the counter, I gave them neither. I gave them a plate, a number, and a clear voice calling orders over the smoke. And when the first customer asked what the restaurant would be called now, I looked up at the faded red letters Dad had protected all those years and said, Mercer and Calhoun's Pit. Same fire. Honest name,